inaasam, kasipagan ng sagot, salat ka man sa kayamanan. Buksan ang pahina ng mga aklat ng karunungan, edukasyon ating kailangan, kamamangan ating iwanan. Please!
Ating lilingkuhin, ang himbang pamilin,
ating tanawin,
bagong wakas ay muling tatanawin.
kinabukasan pagtibayin, pilitin mo gawin,
Pusang pagsisikap,
pag-asa ay yakapin. Edukasyon ang kayamanan ng kahit di naman, isang pangarap ang tutupad, pagsisikapan ng lahat.
pusang pagsisikap,
Kaya mo yun, kaibigan.
mabubuo isang
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented changes to our usual ways of living. But the Department of Education remains unfazed by these challenges to fulfill the mission of Sulong Edukalidad, the rallying call for national effort to deliver quality basic education to all Filipinos, which involve aggressive reforms in the 4 key areas: the K-12 curriculum review and update, improving the learning environment, teachers upskilling and reskilling, and engagement of stakeholders for support and collaboration to move forward together as we prepare the education system for the future. The call for Sulong Edukalidad will continue, and we have built the framework of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, or the BELCP, to put the needs of the learners at top priority. DepEd's BELCP is the major response and commitment to protect the health, safety, and well-being of learners, teachers, and personnel. The plan aims to provide opportunities to continue education even in these trying times with a BELCP in place, supported by unprecedented number of diverse stakeholders from the academe, media, industry groups, NGOs, business and private individuals. Sulong Edukalidad will be able to sustain the aims in its reform for quality basic education. In our journey towards quality education, we have established the 4 pillars of aggressive reforms from the start, and we have been continuing to progress in these pillars. In improving the learning environment, we took action in the construction and rehabilitation of school buildings, ensured the availability of learning materials and equipment, and prioritized our last mile schools. The challenges of the pandemic also brought to light the urgent need to upgrade our ICT infrastructure to service the needs of education. In terms of the teachers upskilling and reskilling, we were able to establish more innovative professional standards for teachers and school heads. We have aligned the professional development of teachers with their career progression to track their development as part of the National Educators Academy of the Philippines transformation. With the launch of the Education Futures program, where we will be focusing on innovative actions and solutions to improve the state of our education, we are now more than ready to start a new journey and continue our fight for quality education for all Filipino learners. Finally, we've given high importance to the engagement of stakeholders for support and collaboration. In support of this, we have convened the Philippine Forum for Accessible Quality Basic Education, or the Education Forum, which will leverage other partnerships for education quality and strengthen partnership with the Philippine Normal University as the country's national center for teacher education. The department has also been developing a professional development program for teachers and school leaders in order to equip them with the skills, materials, and data that will allow them to help their students prepare for PISA 2022. This intervention consists of the following components: online training for teachers and school leaders, development of learning materials and practice tests for students, deepening the analysis of the PISA 2018 results, and supporting school-level action research. Now that the year is about to end, our commitment to Sulong Edukalidad will continue and will be far from being gone. With a lot at stake, considering our new knowledge and experience from this year's challenges, we are equipped to face a new future. As we head on to the future where we will face many challenges and uncertainties, the department will always be the guardian of every Filipino learner's right to education.
Be bright like the afternoon sun, and let everyone who sees you feel inspired by all the great things you do. A bright and inspiring Wednesday afternoon to all our live viewers from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Welcome back to another informative and meaningful episode where we create awareness on our maritime and archipelagic cultural heritage, which aims to raise national consciousness about our ocean, exclusively here in Manamo webinar series. Shout out to all our enthusiastic and very lively audience on our official social media accounts, such as DepEd Philippines Facebook page, DepEd Tayo, and DepEd YouTube channel. As a form of gratitude to more than 150,000 viewers and counting who have been watching us since our first episode, allow me to greet and acknowledge our viewers on the live feed. See? Good afternoon to Michael Zinampan of Cagayan. Good afternoon to Ma'am J.M. Patria Bentula. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Sir Reynante Ureta, watching from QC. Hello, good afternoon to Ma'am Mitch Caliza and Ma'am Irene Sundiam. And as of the moment, we already have 350 viewers and counting. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. You know, this may sound cliche, but we will never get tired of sending you good vibes and expressing our sincerest appreciation for the solid support that you have shown us since our pilot episode. So, once again, we encourage everyone to continue sharing our episodes, and we hope that you will stay with us until our last episode. So now, let me introduce myself first. I am Krisha Ann M. Soriano, Senior Education Program Specialist of the Bureau of Learning Delivery, Teaching and Learning Division, and I will be your host for today. In the past 5 episodes, we have been learning so many wonderful things from our great speakers. And I believe that you continue being with us because the motivation and clamor that you have within to deepen your knowledge in is unstoppable. So join me once again as we journey all together in exploring our seas through the lens of Philippine history. But before we dive deep into our topic, let's have first a warm up activity to pick your interest. We will play an activity which we will call as Guess That Picture. Okay, all you have to do is to guess the picture as quickly as possible. But as they say, a picture depicts 1,000 words. So we will be giving you hints that corresponds to the correct answer for your guidance. We will be giving you 30 seconds to answer each of the question. I am inviting all our viewers to participate in the activity by simply sharing your answers in the comment section of the live feed. Okay, so are you ready? Of course, yes, you are. So now let's have picture number one. What do you think is the answer for picture number one? Okay, see? Picture number one is a balangay. The balangay is the first wooden boat that was excavated in the Southeast Asia. Balangays were instrumental in the settlement of Austronesian people in the Philippines and the Malay archipelago. It was used for cargo and trading, in which Butuan, Agusan del Norte, was a central trading port. So congratulations to all those who got the answer correctly. Now let us proceed to picture number two. I firmly believe that you're all familiar with this picture. So the challenge now is who's going to be the first one to answer this question on the chat box. Let's see. Let's see. As expected, all of you got the answer correctly. So we have here Sir Kaloy Soriano, and he said it's a lighthouse. Thank you so much, sir, for responding. Picture number two is correct. It is a lighthouse. A lighthouse is like a traffic sign on the sea. Its two main purposes are number one, to serve as a navigational aid, and number two, to warn boats of dangerous areas. This lighthouse flashed on your screen is the lighthouse found in Basco, Batanes. Okay, you're all doing great. Congratulations. Now let's move on to picture number three. Try to give the correct answer as quickly as possible. What do you think is picture number three? see? All right. Let's reveal the answer. Picture number 3 is boat building. Okay, congratulations to those who got the answer correctly. And for the last picture, let's have it on the screen. See, I know that this picture is also familiar to everyone, but we are looking for specific words that will describe what this picture means. Let's see. Okay, I have been receiving some responses here. It says here maritime heritage. What else? Just now that I'm receiving your answer in picture number 3. But we need to reveal the answer now. Picture number 4 is an archaeological shipwreck. Okay, that is also considered shipwreck, but we consider it as an archaeological shipwreck mainly because it is considered as an antique. That archaeological shipwreck on your screen is found in Coron, Palawan. And that is probably one of the well-preserved sunken Japanese ships used during World War II. All right, that ends our activity for today. I hope that you have gained something in that activity, and I hope that it helped you feel energized and ready for today's episode. So congratulations, everyone, for a job well done. And thank you so much for your active participation. As you might have noticed, the activity that we just had are all, what do you think? Let me see if you can categorize the pictures that we have shown you earlier. What do you think are those pictures all about? If you know the answer, please don't hesitate to type it in the comment section of our live feed. Again, what do you think are those 4 pictures all about? Can you categorize what those pictures are? Let's see. Okay. Yes, you are all correct. The pictures that we had are all maritime cultural heritages found in our country, which were presented to us during our last episode. But during the last episode, the discussion only focused on the what and where of these maritime cultural heritages. Today, in this episode, we will try to dig deeper as we unveil how can we protect and preserve these precious maritime cultural heritages. And so this afternoon, we are again privileged to have with us another marvelous resource person who shall be talking about the topic entitled Protection and Preservation of Philippine Maritime Cultural Heritage. Without further ado, allow me to introduce our resource person for today. Our resource person for today is a museum researcher at the Maritime and Underwater Cultural Heritage Division of the National Museum of the Philippines. She received her degree in Bachelor of Science in Chemistry at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She is currently pursuing her master's degree in Material Science and Engineering in the same university. Her research work focuses on material analysis, archaeometry, and conservation and preservation of cultural heritage resources. She is presently working on material analysis ceramics and glass beads from Philippine shipwreck sites using spectroscopy techniques. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome with virtual applause our speaker for today, Madam Rachel Angeline P. Ureta.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope we are all doing fine and managing as we go through these challenging times. And thank you, Miss Krisha, for that wonderful introduction. So before I start my presentation, I would like to thank the DepEd for the opportunity to talk in this webinar to celebrate our maritime cultural heritage. So for this episode, I will discuss the protection and preservation of maritime and underwater cultural heritage in the Philippines. Let me first give you the outline of topics. So it is important for us to know first the meaning and scope of maritime and underwater cultural heritage and the threats to this heritage. Next is the methods and actions for the protection and management of UCH or underwater cultural heritage. And I will also give a brief history and development of maritime and underwater archaeological research in the Philippines, including the legal protection of UCH. And lastly, I will discuss the challenges and the steps to be taken for the improvement of protection and preservation of our cultural heritage. So when we hear about maritime and cultural and underwater cultural heritage, we often think about shipwrecks and their cargo. But it actually involves a larger scope than underwater wrecks. It covers all cultural, historical, or archaeological resources related to ancient maritime activities, including underwater, coastal, and foreshore sites. And it also involves research, assessment, investigation, and protection of these resources. So the archaeological research involves maritime, underwater, and nautical archaeology. Maritime archaeology involves the study of human interactions with seas, lakes, and rivers. So this includes lighthouses, ports, harbors, coastal sites, and fishing villages. And underwater archaeology, on the other hand, is a subdiscipline which studies submerged sites, artifacts, human remains, and landscapes. And it also includes material culture studies. And lastly, the nautical archaeology deals with maritime technology, watercraft, and boat building techniques. So these three disciplines are interconnected with each other. In the 2001 UNESCO Convention, underwater cultural heritage, or UCH, is defined as all traces of human existence having a cultural, historical, or archaeological character which have been partially or totally underwater, periodically or continuously for at least 100 years. So, in recent decades, underwater cultural heritage has faced growing threats due to its increasing accessibility and more extensive exploitation. And added to these threats are from natural processes. So these threats are classified into four. The physical mechanical threats are mostly due to erosion and abrasion by currents, tidal movements, as well as mechanical deterioration due to fishing, dredging, and anchoring. And biological threats includes marine borers like shipworm, fungi, and bacteria, which attacks organic materials, especially wood. And chemical threats involves corrosion and oxidation reactions. So generally, the less oxygen, the less corrosion occurs. However, some materials such as iron can still corrode underwater and can affect the organic structure in close proximity to the corroding iron. And lastly, as we can observe, the human threats are the most extensive contributors to these threats. So this involves treasure hunting, which is a major problem because it results to loss of much information. And sometimes it is also promoted in movies and other forms of social media. So it gives a wrong message to the public. Other human threats involve sports diving, fishing, dredging, pollution, infrastructural works, ship movements, and even archaeology when proper methods are not followed or conducted. So with these increasing threats, it is important that UCH must be protected and managed sustainably, not only for known resources, but also for the unknown and future resources. So if the management of UCH is carefully planned in advance, time, money, and human resources can be more effectively utilized. So according to the UNESCO Convention, the in situ preservation of UCH shall be considered as the first option before allowing or engaging in any activities directed at this heritage. So what is in situ preservation? So it is the preservation of underwater cultural heritage in its original location. So why do we resort to in situ preservation? So there is a need to preserve heritage for the future, and most countries nowadays have a well-developed law and regulation system concerning the protection of maritime archaeological heritage. There are also existing legal protection here in the Philippines for the UCH, which I will discuss later. And the amount of shipwrecks discovered grows fast, and there is not enough capacity to do research. And most of the time, or usually, the excavation of underwater wreck is very expensive. So even though diving is no longer an exclusive activity, interventions underwater are still costly. So it is necessary to use special equipment and to be able to work accurately. It is crucial to spend a lot of time underwater. So there is also a prolonged time between the discovery and excavation of a wreck. And lastly, there is a lack of conservation knowledge, so in situ preservation is preferred. It is important to note, though, that in situ preservation can never completely stop deterioration, but it can help better the management of UCH from natural threats and prioritize where the resources should be invested. So here are some examples of in situ preservation. This is from other international underwater sites. So the first photo shows the use of sandbags to stabilize a log boat. The second photo shows the installation of artificial seagrass. And the last photo shows the use of geotextiles. So each method has its own advantages and disadvantages or limitations. So thus, a site must be carefully assessed before choosing the method to be used. Monitoring, assessment, and documentation is important in the protection and management of UCH. This is done to measure changes that might occur on the condition of the site and the effectiveness of the chosen strategy or method to be able to act on any detrimental changes. So with the advancement of technology, there are many useful equipment for monitoring. Example is this multi-beam sonar as shown on the second and third photo. So this can be used to map and measure the seafloor to help detect and visualize changes in seabed morphology. Although in situ preservation should be considered as the first option, excavation and other interventive techniques are vital tools for archaeologists to uncover new information about the past. So for the purpose of scientific studies or for the protection of UCH, the methods and techniques to be used should be non-destructive as possible, and it should contribute to the preservation of the remains. So in accordance also to UNESCO recommendations, the um, site should be left underwater, but for their safeguard, study, and conservation, they may be risened. Here are some advanced underwater equipment used for the survey and excavation of underwater sites. So first is the side scan sonar. So this is a tool that uses sound waves to develop nautical charts, identify objects, and map the seafloor. We have recently acquired side scan sonar in the museum. However, it has not yet been tested in an actual survey. Next is the remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, which is an underwater equipment controlled by a person, typically on a surface vessel. So it is equipped with video cameras, and lights to transit images and video back to the ship. While the AUV, or the autonomous underwater vehicle, is an equipment that can function without real-time control from a human operator. So last are the deep rovers and the submersibles, which are capable of diving up to 1,000 meters depth. And it can carry one passenger and one pilot. So they are also fitted with camera and lights. So the ROV, AUV, and submersibles are not available in the National Museum, but the past underwater archaeological excavations use the available equipment of partner institutions or collaborating agencies. For the survey of a site, magnetometer and metal detectors are used to identify anomalies. So there are many methods used in removing or loosening sediments when a site is identified. But water dredging is one of the most used methods, aside from a simple hand fanning. So you can also see here the grid reference system, which is used to divide the site into areas which provide orientation and defined sectors. So recording where the grids are is very important, since it can provide each object with a set of coordinates for documentation. However, this is a relatively traditional method, and it can be quite limited in cases of poor visibility underwater. So the more advanced method that is used now is by using GPS, which provides the position in latitude, longitude, and altitude of the mobile receiver anywhere on Earth through satellites. So the advanced equipment that I discussed earlier can also be very useful in documenting the site, especially if there is a poor visibility. So another conventional method of documenting a site is through photography and video registration. So the data collected from these are used to illustrate a site plan. For example, is this site plan of the Pandanan shipwreck in Palawan. If excavation or recovery is necessary for the purpose of scientific studies or for protection of UCH, the methods and techniques used must be as non-destructive as possible, and it should contribute to the preservation of the remains. So you can actually recover the archaeological finds to better study the objects. So this graph shows a comparison of the preservation of materials in dry land and in wetland sites. So as we can see, the objects are more preserved in wet land sites than in dry sites. So for archaeologists working in a maritime and underwater environment, the potential for organic finds is significantly higher than on land. So the reason of this is mostly environmental. So as we said earlier, the major threats to UCH comes from human activities. And in underwater sites, there is a very reduced human activities. So it shows that human activities has a very significant impact to UCH. So for an object at this level, it translates to reduced physical abrasion and mechanical action, and also um, the reduced anaerobic environmental conditions and depth of burial that limits or totally precludes access by a marine organism. So it is most likely more preserved in underwater sites. So next, after the recovery of archaeological finds, um, we go to the conservation and finds handling. So all measures and actions aimed at safeguarding tangible cultural heritage while ensuring its accessibility to present and future generations. So conservation is about preventing damage and loss to our cultural heritage. So it aims to minimize change to collection material, protect items or objects from adverse effects of climate and deterioration, and to safeguard our heritage for future generations. So this may include preservation, restoration, examination, documentation, research, preventive conservation, and education. So the on-site treatment or first aid, as we call it, is a conservator's job, which aims to minimize the shock experienced by an object as it moves from the stable environment underwater, where it has formed some form of equilibrium, to one where it is exposed to rapid deterioration potential by excavation. So mostly, these objects that are recovered will rapidly degrade in air if the salt or if the salts were not removed in the object. Thus, desalination or removing of salts is the first step in the long-term conservation of artifacts. So this is done by washing the object in successive baths of fresh water. So artifacts should only also be handled and packed once for transport to the conservation laboratory. So here you can see the artifacts recovered underwater they are in baths to start the desalination process to remove the salts that may cause deterioration on the objects. And the packing for transport back to the laboratory should be carried out straight away, and it is also imperative that the objects are not left out in direct sunlight. So once the objects are in the laboratory, conservation treatment must have minimal intervention, and it also must be reversible, and it should reduce possible problems with future treatment and use. So the objects recovered have different range of material, from organic materials such as wood to metals, composites, ceramics, and other inorganic materials. So these objects have different properties and therefore require specific treatment per material. So the chosen method is usually selected because of the condition of the object. So it should be considered. And the conservator, the time available, and the equipment and materials available to work with it. So um, the final storage and display environment should also be considered. So there is no fixed approach to object conservation. So a conservator should always assess first the condition of the object before choosing a right method. And full documentation and inventory of the object is very important in archaeological research. From the moment you recover it underwater to the labeling of accession number and um, to the databasing, it is very important. And the objects also may be stored in repositories or displayed in an exhibition for collection management. So regardless of this, the condition of the artifacts are closely monitored and maintained. So the photos above show an sample of conservation treatment. When the objects are taken to the conservation laboratory, the desalination process continues to completely remove the salt. And also, we do mechanical cleaning or removing of incrustations on the objects. Sometimes we do also chemical cleaning, but we use very mild chemicals only. And depending on the use or if it will be stored or displayed, um, we do restorations also on the objects. So I will now proceed with the development of Philippine maritime underwater archaeological research. So it is important that we know that we have this legal protection of UCH in the Philippines. So first, the RA 4846 or the Cultural Properties Preservation and Preservation Act of 1966, which is amended in 1974, states that the ships or boats in parts or in whole are considered as cultural properties. And in 1967, this is the earliest shipwreck investigation done in Albay Gulf. However, there is no established underwater archaeology office yet at this time. So the methods that were used were not systematic and it was not published. Then the creation of NMP or National Museum Archaeology Unit was in 1979 after a museum researcher graduated from an underwater archaeology training course. And then a policy guideline on the fact that the government is provides insufficient funds for field work, and there is also a rising incidence of shipwreck looting. So in 1988, the Underwater Archaeology section was created under the National Museum Archaeology Division. So the National Museum Act was created in 1998, while the National Heritage Act was established in 2009. So here, it states that UCH is considered as an archaeological area, and the treasure hunting permits is issued by the NMP, or the National Museum of the Philippines. So the guideline on the methodology of survey, exploration, excavation activities were updated in 2013. So in 2016, Much D, my division right now, the Maritime and Underwater Cultural Heritage Division, was created, and its mandate was also extended. So at present, the protection of Much or the Maritime and Underwater Cultural Heritage is strengthened through the NMP Act or the RA 11333, and the regulatory functions were transferred to NCCA. So recently, the guidelines governing the issuance of treasure hunting permits was published by the NCCA. There are several maritime and underwater archaeological sites discovered in the Philippine archipelago dated as early as 9th century until the World War II period. So this is a testament of our country's rich maritime heritage even before the colonial period. So, as the leading government agency tasked with the UCH protection, the NMP continues to analyze these resources to reveal valuable information about our heritage and our maritime history. So with this, I would like to present some of the major surveys and excavations conducted by the National Museum through the years. If you were able to attend last week's episode, the episode 5, my colleague from National Museum had already discussed this site, so I will only give a brief overview of this site. First is the Butuan boats. So Butuan boats are declared as National Cultural Treasure, and the recent C14 AMS analysis of some of the Butuan boats revealed a 10th century dates for boat 1, 8th to 9th century for boat 2, and 9th century for boats 4, 5, and 9. So it revealed, the study of this revealed a plank built edge peg, the use of dowels to fasten the planks, and the lush log construction technique. Next are the 13th to 16th century shipwrecks. So in the 13th century, we have the Breaker Reef shipwreck and the Pawikan Shoal shipwreck, where the most of the archaeological finds are Chinese ceramic wares or Qingbei ceramics. So both shipwrecks provide tangible evidence of the vibrant commercial exchange between China and the Philippines during the 13th century CE. So for the 15th century, there is a maritime trade ban, which severely restricted the outflow of Chinese merchandise, which that was taken as an opportunity by Southeast Asians to take over the Chinese maritime routes. So this is evidenced by the Pandanan shipwreck. So in this shipwreck, 70% of the cargo are mostly Vietnamese ceramics, and there are lesser cargo of Chinese and Thai wares. So here in this shipwreck, one remarkable object was recovered. So it is a declared national cultural treasure. It is a big blue and white porcelain bowl with kilin and phoenix decorations. Okay, so sorry, I've been having a slight technical difficulty. I'm so sorry for that. I had a slight technical difficulty. So, to proceed, um, another late 15th to early 16th century shipwrecks include the Lena Shoal shipwreck and the Santa Cruz shipwreck. So, from the Lena Shoal, another national cultural treasure was recovered. So, this is um, a blue and white porcelain dish with a flying elephant design at the center. And the Chinese maritime trade resumed in the late 15th century despite the ongoing maritime trade ban, as evidenced by these two shipwrecks. So in San Isidro shipwreck and Canduli Shoal shipwreck, which are both from the 16th century CE, it shows or it shows the European naval expedition that reached Southeast Asia in the early 16th century, which ushered new sea-based network links. So this resulted in the birth of global maritime trade as manifested by the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade route. The most or one of the most known shipwreck site in the late 16th century is the San Diego shipwreck. So San Diego was a Spanish merchant vessel converted into a warship to battle with the Dutch ship Mauritius on December 14, 1600, that sank off the waters of Fortune Island, Batangas. So this resulted in the recovery of more than 34,000 archaeological objects. So it provides a treasure trove of information in our maritime culture during that period. So two national cultural treasures were recovered from this shipwreck. One is the gold seal of Antonio de Morga, and the second is the bronze astrolabe or mariner's astrolabe. During the 18th century, tea was highly regarded in England as a luxury and it is also expensive. So proof for the demand for tea in this period may also be gleaned by the number of porcelain tea sets recovered from the Griffin shipwreck. So here we can see the blue and white porcelain tea sets from the shipwreck. And another is the Tagbita shipwreck in the 19th century. So the vessel's location is very significant since Palawan at this time was part of the Sulu Sultanate. It was heavily involved in the trade between the English and the Chinese. So the National Museum of the Philippines also collaborated with other private agencies or institutions like the RV Petrel of Navigea to survey, monitor, and document World War II shipwrecks. So examples are the investigations of the Battle of Surigao Strait and Battle of Ormoc Bay. So the use of the research vessels' advanced underwater equipment provided valuable data for the documentation of the sites. So here we can see the World War II shipwrecks. This is a screenshot of the live feed from the ROV equipment. Monitoring and documentation of more accessible World War II wrecks, such as those in Subic Bay, was also part of the UCH management project of the National Museum of the Philippines. Example is the survey of El Capitan shipwreck, one of the most dived sites in Subic Bay. So the NMP also collaborated with the RV Petrel again to conduct multi-beam sonar imaging of the SS New York and Oryoku Maru. Both are also World War II shipwrecks. So the management and protection of UCH is a difficult task because of the many challenges it poses. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, it makes the management and campaigns for UCH protection more difficult. And um, these are the challenges that we face for the protection and preservation of UCH. It is evident that underwater surveys and excavations are expensive. So it is necessary to use special equipment and to be able to work accurately. It is crucial to spend a lot of time underwater. So this makes the excavation more expensive than on land. So under so the first challenge is the limited funding or insufficient budget. And another challenge is that underwater archaeologists must have proper training and knowledge. And right now, we are lacking qualified personnel for these tasks, considering the increased number of reported archaeological sites to be studied. So there is also lack of strict implementation with the policies of UCH activities and also miseducation. And the major challenge is the treasure hunting, illicit trade, and antique collecting, which greatly causes loss of significant information of our history. So what's next or what can we do? So raising awareness is often regarded as the best possible way to preserve our cultural heritage. So essentially, it is in any activity that promotes an understanding and acceptance for the meaning and value of heritage. So it aims to conserve it for the future generations. So presently, the museum is increasing the public awareness programs through social media educational posts, museum from home programs, virtual gallery tours, and soon the digitization of records and databases to make the collections and their study more available to the public. It is also important to involve the stakeholders for the management and protection of our maritime and underwater cultural heritage. Um, in many coastal communities, they have this strong sense of cultural awareness that they have developed. And due to the shared heritage, cooperation exists between these communities. And specifically, the diving community, they are now establishing their own shipwreck databases and are actively involved in discussion forums regarding their environment. So our role as a government agency is to facilitate and influence the discussions regarding the research and protection of these sites. There should also be a strict implementation of policies and establishment of partnerships for museum works and research. So here are the references for this presentation. And thank you very much for listening. If you want to learn more about our maritime cultural heritage, please follow the National Museum of the Philippines social media platforms. We post many interesting stories about the archaeological sites and artifact history. And I will also like to take this opportunity to invite you to join us on Friday as we celebrate the National Maritime Day. We will be conducting Much Forum 2021, which will be discussing the significance and applications of material analysis in maritime archaeology. So we will also be launching the virtual gallery tour of the 300 years of maritime trade in the Philippines, featuring the shipwreck sites from 13th, 15th, and 16th century CE. So again, thank you for listening and keep safe always.
Wow, thank you so much, Ma'am Rachel, for that very comprehensive and brilliant presentation. But we are not done yet, Ma'am Rachel. We still have the question and answer portion. So now may I invite Ma'am Rachel once again on the virtual stage for the question and answer portion. And hello, Ma'am Rachel. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ma'am Krisha.
I haven't asked you this yet, ma'am. How are you feeling today po pala?
Feeling okay naman po, despite the
Yeah.
pandemic. Yeah.
Yes, and you should be, ma'am, because you just did an amazing presentation po kanina. And congratulations po,
You-
ma'am, for a job well done. But
Yes,
now, ma'am, we have noted some questions for you po. Are you now ready, ma'am?
yes.
Okay po.
Go
For our
ahead.
first question, ma'am, earlier you have laid down the importance of protecting and preserving our maritime cultural heritages. You have also shared to us the ongoing projects and initiatives that our government has been doing to preserve and promote our cultural maritime heritages. Now, do you think that the government and the Filipinos in general have been doing everything to protect and promote our cultural maritime heritages? Or do you think all our efforts are enough? Or there are still efforts and things that the government and the Filipino people need to work on?
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Krisha, for that question. Actually, um, as I have said earlier, we are doing um, the increase of um, or the raising awareness programs for the Filipinos to be more aware of our maritime cultural heritage for also for the protection of these sites. And I think we are doing our best for to raise this awareness, but I think it can also be improved more,
Uh-huh.
especially for the
Yeah.
strict implementation of the um, policies regarding the protection of ECH. And as individuals, as Filipinos, we can also do small things to protect our ECH. So if you know of some um, looting activities happening on a site, you should report it immediately to the nearest local government units or the National Museum office. And also, we can support the advocacies regarding the protection and preservation of UCH. And with these little things and our efforts to also to be informed about our maritime culture, this can greatly help us for also for the benefit of the future generations.
Actually, ma'am, I'm interested to know then what you have presented are most of them are actually about shipwrecks po, di ba? How
Yes.
about the preservation and protection naman po of the intangible MCH po? How do we have existing policies po to protect and preserve those like yung boat building that was mentioned last episode
Yes.
na kailangan nga rin sana ma-impart yun sa ating mga youth, lalo na those who are residing near the coastal areas, diba? So do we have existing policies po to protect and preserve din yung ganun, mga
Yes,
intangible
actually,
nating MCH?
yes, the legal protection that I have discussed earlier. It also includes the intangible cultural heritage, such as the boat building
Mm-hmm.
activities or what else? Not only the tangible cultural heritage, but also the intangible cultural heritage that involves
Yes.
maritime activities, um, involving some fisher folks or in the coastal areas.
Okay. You mentioned in your closing spills, ma'am, that you have a website where you have cited some of the stories po, ano. We are interested to know po, ano yung mga stories na yun? Ano po yung mga tinakal natin doon sa mga stories na pinili natin?
Well, um, it is mostly, these stories are from material culture analysis. So once
Mm-hmm.
we recovered these objects, we do material culture analysis, like
Uh-huh.
ceramic analysis or chemical analysis to know the um, maritime trade route or the
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing techniques used, so that we can gain more knowledge on these artifacts. So in our social media page, we do this Maritime Monday post. So every Monday we
Oh.
post like an artifact of the week. So we,
Oh.
yeah, we highlight this one artifact and then we share the um, results or data gathered through archaeological analysis, the history behind the shipwreck and behind the artifact itself.
That's really very interesting, ma'am, no?
Yeah,
How I wish I could also make use of those instruments that you were using, di ba? Ang sarap
yeah.
kasing balikan rin yung history. And it's just so magical, no? Kung personally speaking, I feel like yung idea of when you were going to use something or like an instrument, no? Tapos malalaman mo na kung kailan at ano yung mga yung by merely looking at its components, malalaman mo na yung history ng mga bagay na yon. It's really very interesting. So thank you so much, Ma'am Ha, for sharing your experiences and
Thank
then
you.
for sharing din your expertise as a
Okay.
researcher po. So for now, we proceed to our second question. If you are going to propose a program or project for educators and learners, which is geared towards the protection and preservation of our maritime cultural heritages, what would it be and why?
Yeah.
Parang nasa Miss Universe.
Actually, as educators, um, they have a big role. We have a big role in
Yeah.
raising awareness to the protection and preservation of UCH. As I have said earlier, also, these awareness programs are actually the best way to preserve our cultural heritage. So I think we should do this educational programs more, like this webinar. We
Yeah.
should also have mentorship programs, especially for the youth. And I think we should strengthen our campaign against treasure hunting or looting. And I think, yeah, the best way is to increase the um, awareness.
Awareness.
Yes,
Yes. Information dissemination, ma'am. Ano.
yes,
Especially, I think using the social media is really a very powerful tool for us to disseminate information.
yes,
Siguro I'm looking forward nga po no na um, aside from giving essays no kapag kunyari siguro hindi na ganitong remote learning no aside
yes,
from quiz bee ganyan
mm,
siguro we could make use also of applications rin siguro na pwede nating na ginagamit na ng mga generation ngayon
yes,
gagamitin natin yun hindi para makapag-educate pa lalo at makapag-raise awareness sa mga causes katulad nga nitong mana mo, hindi lang sa maritime, kundi kahit sa land.
yes.
So, meron po ba kayong message, ma'am? Final message directly sa ating mga viewers na nanonood sa atin ngayon as a as one of the uh, isang parte ng National Museum of the Philippines. We'd be interested to know po ano po yung message um, ng Museum of the Philippines sa ating mga manonood po.
First of all, thank you. Kasi ito pa lang po na being informed with this kind of topics on our maritime cultural heritage, it is already a big help and it is very significant. Kasi as we inform ourselves, as we raise our awareness, we accept our maritime culture and we learn to appreciate it more and to
Yes.
share it with the future generations. It is for the benefit of the future generations and the youth. So please continue to support the advocacies in the protection and preservation of our cultural heritage. Also, um, follow follow us, the National Museum of the Philippines, and also the other government agencies like this DepEd and NCCA that promotes this kind of activities, and let us support the advocacies to protect our cultural heritage. So, thank you.
Yun, thank you so much, Ma'am Rachel, for that lucid, explicable, rich, and very informative discussion. Thank you for sharing your expertise to all of us, and thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you, Ma'am
So,
Rachel.
yeah, personally, I think your presentation serves as a wake up call to all of us to be reminded of our roles and responsibilities in our community and in the maritime environment in particular. So, since the first episode, it has been emphasized that our maritime resources are our lifeblood. And so, there is really a need for all of us to take a share to this cause. So, once again, thank you so much, ma'am. There you
Thank
have it,
you.
ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed resource persons in today's episode. Before we finally end our episode, we would like to inform all our viewers that if you're going to share your thoughts, your takeaways, or selfies relative to today's episode, we highly encourage you to include our official hashtags in your posts. These are hashtag DepEdManamo EP6 or episode 6 and hashtag Manamo 2021. We'd be glad to see your posts on the different virtual platforms. Just a gentle reminder for everyone, kindly fill out the evaluation form using the link and QR code flashed on the screen. The form will contain content evaluation questions about today's episode, and you need to get at least 60% correct answers for you to receive a certificate of participation. Again, you need to get at least 60% correct answers for you to receive a certificate of participation. And we hope to see you once again next week for the last two episodes of this webinar series. These are the Philippine maritime industries and its economic roles and impact, which will be aired on September 27, 2021. That is on Monday. And the topic on maritime protection and security, which will be aired on September 29, and that is on Wednesday next week. Through the Manamo webinar series, the more we see how diverse, how complex and unique our culture is. It traverses not only beyond what we see in land, but even in our seas and oceans. So to all our educators, let's impart the new understanding that you have gained all throughout this webinar series to our learners. We need to deepen how our learners should perceive our maritime resources. We need to emphasize to our learners that our maritime resources are not just with economic value, but more importantly, our maritime resources are part of our lives. It is part of our culture. It is part of our being a Filipino. And so we need to work together in order to protect and preserve our maritime and archaeological cultural heritages. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in today's webinar session entitled Our Seas, Our Livelihood, Our Heritage, Connecting Lives and Nations. This is Krisha Ann Matamu Soriano, your host, signing off. Please stay safe and may the Almighty bless us all.